never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn
Hi guys,
around.
welcome back to my Steps to Sobriety, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Today is another fantastic day for an interview because my guest today, David Greer, is a man who has truly loved his drink. He's like me. We both got a lot out of it. Typically rocket fuel, typically, yes, come on, give me the power. And you guys think, what the hell is he talking about? Well, we're going to explore that today. Why so many entrepreneurs and so many people who go out there to make this world a better place and make them leave a legacy, why we fall foul to alcohol. So David, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much. It's thrilling to be here. I'm really happy to be here today.
When did your love affair start? When was the first time that you had a drink?
The first drink was when my father gave me a little bit of champagne in a glass, and I had a sip, and it was so awful, I spit it right back in the glass. And my dad had to waste the whole glass. I was not popular.
Oh, please. Unless you vomited into it, a good alcoholic father would have taken that. That's all right. Down he goes. So
well,
your dad
for
was
me,
not...
it's no, so I was adopted at birth. And
Right.
I don't believe that my adoptive parents, who their mom and dad,
Yeah.
were or are alcoholics. They did like to have, dad was an entrepreneur. He took over the business his dad, my grandfather, started. And he came home from work and had a scotch, and mom had a gin and tonic. And so I saw a pattern of daily drinking, but they'd have one, maybe two, right? And then, sometimes, my aunts and uncles come from out of town and like there'd be a big booze up, right? And booze was always around. So I was really modeled the acceptance of all of that. Now, 4 years ago, I decided to go look into my birth families.
Wow.
And I found both my birth mother and my birth father.
Wow.
And my birth mother has definitely been an alcoholic pretty well her whole life. My maternal brother, Gary, died in 2015 before I had a chance to meet him of his alcoholism. And my birth father is not an alcoholic, but his sister is. And he wonders about his dad because he moved out when he was 18, so he didn't see his dad. His dad, by the way, was an anesthetist. Coincident.
Well, there you are. Well, we can talk about that. We are probably quite prone to this.
I just remember like wanting to be part of the crowd in the summer of like grade 9 or so, and offering someone to buy a beer for $1. This is back in like 1972, where $1 was worth a lot of money. And I probably had my first beers around then. And then in grade 10, in where I grew up, high school was 10, 11, and 12. And I really became involved in sports. And it's starting with football in the fall, and went to my first keg party, and really had some binge drinking experiences, and was definitely to be part of the crowd. But my story of my relationship to alcohol is the progressive nature of the disease. Like, I went to those parties and drank a lot, but I didn't drink during the week, and I didn't even necessarily drink every weekend until probably grade 12. Right. And again, it wasn't like it was at the end where I was isolating and drinking alone. It was more always with other people after, a Friday night basketball game. Then I moved out of the home when I was 18, moved from the prairies to the West Coast here, Vancouver, BC, Canada, which is where I've lived for the last 40 plus years. And, eventually went back to university, was part of the rugby team. So, lots of drinking. But again, I don't know the exact spot where I turned into a pickle, as we might say. And what I know is that when my wife got pregnant with our first child, I committed to her to stop drinking. And that lasted for maybe 24 hours. So I know then I was a pickle. Like I was definitely totally pickled. And
what
you know
did the alcohol? What did the alcohol give you? What was it doing at that time? Were you already an entrepreneur yourself at that time?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I at 22, I joined a young software startup as the first employee after the founders.
Okay,
and I was still at university, and I think there's a number of things. I think part of it was just coping with the stress. Some of it was my whole, media's depiction. My personal belief is you drink a lot of alcohol when you're successful.
Who were your heroes at that time?
Yeah, my former partner and I were in the market that we were in the computer market we were in. We were known on a first name basis.
Oh, wonderful. No, with that, I mean heroes. Who, what kind of films did you watch?
I was at that time a big science fiction kind of fan, lined up for the first Star Wars movies.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. But James loved James Bond.
Okay.
Right?
Well, yeah. Okay. There you go.
Got taken to Thunderball when I was like in grade 4 or 5, even though it shouldn't have been because it was a PG movie.
Of course.
But I love that whole secret agent. I mean, in grade 7, I was like with friends doing invisible ink and going to the library and like getting books on how to do secret stuff. So that whole hero genre, Invincible, like, the James Bond and James Bond drank the martini, like
absolutely
all of that stuff is definitely manifested in my belief systems.
Absolutely.
Right. And then also my partner and I were like stars in our market, like we were the big shots, and deservedly so. Like we earned that reputation. But it's then easy to build on that and think you deserve all the alcohol that you're having.
Oh yeah. And what was your favorite tipple? What did you drink?
Beer. Beer and wine. When I first got sober, the notion I could sort of almost think about not having beer, almost. But the idea that I'd like be having meals without wine, like that was inconceivable when I first got into sobriety.
Including breakfast?
Nope, no. I was, I had, I pretty much had very strong rules, but the traditional progressive, alcoholic, I've heard the story many times, progressive nature of the disease. It's like, I have all these lines I wouldn't cross. So I never drink in the car. And then, towards the last 7 or 8 years, somewhere I crossed that line. Then I'll never drink in the car while it's moving. I'll never have one, unfortunately, I never did it with anyone else in the car ever. So I never crossed that line. And, it was like, you don't drink before 5 o'clock, and then it was 4 o'clock. And then, by the end, it was like 3 o'clock, which I think was part of where I knew the jig was up. And I'm the kind of alcoholic, I still had a house and I still had some sort of career, and I had my wife and 3 kids and 2 cars in the driveway kind of thing. But I'd lost everything in here. I had lost all the self-respect, right? I got sick and tired of being sick and tired.
So true. So true.
And that and an extraordinary person who. Can I continue kind of into how I got sober? I know you asked. I'm still trying to answer the question when I have my first drink.
It's beautiful. It's beautifully flowing. Oh no, brother. I mean, that is so beautiful, the way you describe your journey, because you were a high functioning alcoholic, but very early on, you, through a mixture of genes and our environment, you were very much, and not just environment, I should say, the marketing that already was out there, and the general acceptance within the population. We were bound. We were set up to fail.
Yes, completely.
Exactly. This was a time when men like you and me were going out there, and we were leaving a stamp on the world, wanting to spread our wings, being successful, working. That defined us. Work. And then after a while, after 16 hours, guess what? Your body is saying, "Oh, fuck off! I don't want anymore." And then certainly for me, alcohol, you called it first rocket fuel. Hell, that was exactly what it was. Give me 2 glasses of wine. The first glass of wine goes, ah. Literally that sound effect came with the first glass. The second glass of wine was, bing. Okay, let's keep working. Let's do things. And
so I had that period, but towards the end, it was more like, the six-pack to the first one is like, okay, we just,
Okay. Maybe my words should be taken a little bit more with artistic license. Maybe the first bottle of wine, and then the second. Now we're talking.
Now I can go for that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I should not kid around. That was me at the end too. What was your limit? When did you pass out? What was which amounts?
So
did you take?
my kind of modus operandi would be to start like at that 4 or 5, and then go until it was time to go to bed. So it's kind of get to a certain level of inebriation, and then again, there's kind of this self, like as a high performing individual, it's like, being out of control or slurring my words or falling down and stumbling. Like that's too drunk. So I would sometimes go over, right, and get there, but it was about just controlling, getting to a certain level of inebriation and then kind of maintaining that till I passed out. So that was kind of the way that I operate. That was the way that I mostly operated.
Interesting. I was harder going because certainly at many times in my life, I drank to escape my reality, and I drank to escape my pain. I drank to escape the monsters under my bed and inside my head. And for that, I needed more. I was slurring my words. Yes, please. You probably would have not understand a word. And that is what I needed. So what happened when there were hard times in your life? You were pointing towards the anxiety and the being early on thrown into the limelight. Not everything would have been smooth out there. There would have been lots of not so nice times.
There's bumps in the road, but I really have been very blessed, like not having really huge bumps in the road. And like my family of origin, my father only passed away, a couple of years ago at like 93. My mom this past week celebrated her 95th birthday, and I try and make sure to see her a couple times a year and talk to her, every 10 days or 2 weeks. So, and yes, I definitely drank to, overcome some of those things that I didn't like in the business. But I think a lot of it was just to keep going. And then, like my principal 3 fears after having done a lot of personal growth work, having got sober, is I'm not good enough. And as an entrepreneur and running a business like that, so that one is very present. It's my fault. It's kind of, that other fear is like someone's going to say it's your fault. So, I'm a hugely over-responsible person, right? Take too much responsibility. So when you're over responsible, you can't, you don't want to get too drunk because then you can't be responsible. So it's got this tug of war going on. And then the third one is, who do you think you are? Like, who do you think you are to deserve a great life? Who do you think you are, to, the first holiday I took I did some therapy work, and I came to realize, well, I'm principally an extrovert. I really need some, and I isolated as drinking. So I have to be careful about isolating. But truthfully, I need some time just by myself to recuperate, build my resiliency. So like the first time I went up to Whistler, a local ski resort in the summertime, and did 6 days by myself, and basically insisted with my wife that I was going to go by myself. Like that was a big step to move out of codependency. And that whole, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to have like 6 days totally by yourself, without your spouse, without your children, without anyone else? Like that one is still work sometimes.
That's it. But there are two. Who do you think you are? One is the aim to, or the focus on being selfish. The other one is, who do you think you are to do that? Like in my case, the imposter syndrome. Who am I to actually sit here, have a show, and talk to people? Who you bloody little, and there's this voice going 10,000 miles an hour, and you just think it. And it's weird. It's still so much working in the underground, and it's trying to sabotage me. And from now and then, I really have to stop. I have to look on my shoulder and say, "Hey, look, okay, look, this is my 325th show now. I think I've established myself."
Yeah. What do you think? You think you're maybe doing okay?
Yeah, exactly. Come on.
There's a little voice going, no, that's not enough.
Exactly. Oh, I know that voice so well.
Not that I've ever heard that voice in my head.
Oh no, never. You're right. But that is what we need to accept, because most people are not even aware that these voices are there. They are just they're slaves to these core beliefs that are often so warped and so out of this world. Your failure. Absolutely. My God, I accumulated little letters behind my name, title after title after freaking title. I made a point of doing a publication every 6 months in my field. And it was just, it was never enough.
I was just going to say, and that's not enough.
I was considering myself a failure, and I think that is my worst core belief. It's still there today. It's still my go-to. And I'm now, 56, for crying out loud. I've got another 50 years to go. So I'm working on this core
still
belief.
working on that,
yeah exactly. I don't know who I want to be when I grow up, but
I'd say on the professional side, I didn't have a lot of trouble with imposter syndrome, and I didn't have a lot of feeling like a failure. So it was more on the deserving side.
Interesting.
And then, again, in sobriety and in personal growth work, one of the things that it's really taken a lot of work is to, people would tell me they loved our products and that we were a great company, but to really accept it and let it into my heart, to like compliments, like land and come in. I'm way, way better at that, but it's like, again, I think that's mostly the I'm not good enough fear. It's like, if I really take that in, then, well, maybe I am good enough. And what now?
Okay. I like that take on things, because it's the feeling of inadequacy that makes us strive, that makes us move forward. So absolutely. So I often take anger of failure I often take anger that comes from my failures, rightly or wrongly so. However I perceive the situation, let's say, however I perceive it, if it was a failure or not, I probably think it was. But that anger that comes from there, that frustration, I take as a power to move forward, to refocus. To a certain degree, nowadays, I love to make mistakes because I learn so much from them. So whilst I love to win, I also nowadays appreciate the lessons I learn when I don't win. I actually love them a lot. But emotionally, of course, they still confirm, see, you're a failure. You can't even get that right.
My former coach, Kevin Lawrence, did a lot of coaching with me. Everything in life's an experiment. There is no failure. Is just that's just a perspective.
I like that a lot.
Right?
Yeah.
And you just, you try something. If you go in just treating it as an experiment, then, whatever happens, you learn something.
Touche.
Now, what we get attached to is that we run an experiment, and then we get very attached to the outcome that we're certain is going to happen. And that's where we trip ourselves up really badly, because we're now not attached to the experiment. we're attached to a future outcome we're convinced is going to happen.
Sure.
So that's really important distinction. I do a lot of coaching with entrepreneurs around trying to treat more of what they're doing as an experiment. Like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Why don't you go try it? And then, but don't be attached to what happens. Just go try it, and then let the facts tell you, what happened, rather than you being emotionally attached to what you think the facts are going to be. And Kevin too talks about facing the brutal facts, which is I think that if an entrepreneur faces the brutal facts, you can always find a way through them. The problem is when you're not facing up to whatever the brutal fact is. And I want to come back to Kevin, because we kind of did, what led to my drinking. We've talked a little bit about, some of the things I've learned in recovery and through personal growth work, but we need the in-between part, which is, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So I want to tell you a little bit about what happened. So in 2007, I was at a training event with the guy by the name of Vern Harnish, who has a business framework that I think is one of the best in the world. And anyways, in the back of the room were a couple coaches. And at that point, I'd gone off sailing for 2 years with our family. We lived on a sailboat in the Mediterranean for 2 years and homeschooled our 3 kids while sailing 5,000 miles, 10,000 kilometers in the Mediterranean. And I came back. I'd been with the business for 20 years. I'd sold out. I wasn't done for life. And now I was ready to find some engaging things that, professionally. And I wasn't finding them. And so I went to the back room to talk to these coaches, and one of them made me more uncomfortable than I had been in a number of years. In fact, I had tears in the corner of my eyes. And I think all he did was he took his hand and he kind of went around. There's probably 100 entrepreneurs in the room. And he said, well, I bet almost everyone in this room needs your help. And I thought maybe that's true. That's probably true, but no one wants my help, because I'd been trying for, at that point, 3-4 years to find entrepreneurs to help. So anyways, he gave me his card, and I stared at his card, and the telephone was way, way, way too heavy to pick up. Call Kevin. But thankfully, he saw something that day, and he called me a few weeks later. And then he said, do you remember who I am? And I said, oh yeah, I remember who you are. Your card's sitting right here.
Excellent.
And the universe put Kevin in my path to get sober, is what I believe. And so on my 50th birthday, August 9th, 2007, we had our first coaching session together. And when you go have Kevin as your coach, your first 2 coaching sessions are 2 8-hour days in a row. You don't go with Kevin unless you're all in.
Oh, wow. I like that.
And Kevin and I started working together. And we worked together for 18 months until January 26, 2009, about 10:30 at night. I had my last beer, and I sent an email message to Kevin on the topic for our coaching session the next day. And I said, I want to talk to you about my drinking. And the next day, we had a coaching call. And no way was I willing to admit I was an alcoholic, but I was admitting he was the first person I admitted I had a drinking problem to. Brilliant. And, I'd engendered enough trust with Kevin, and we had the kind of relationship. I knew that once I admitted it to him, that he was never going to ever let me off the hook. I knew deep down that Kevin was not going to let me off the hook. And coincidentally, Kevin is a summer place in Washington State, just south of where we live here in British Columbia. And, it's kind of a communal thing, and, there's common campfires. And he sat around the campfire a lot of summer nights talking to someone that had decades of experience in AA. So when I told Kevin I had a drinking problem, of which he had no idea, right? Because anytime I was in a call, it was not a time of day I drank. So, and I'm a high performing alcoholic. So anything that Kevin got me to do, I did. And anyways, he got me to commit to go to an AA meeting by the end of that week. That was a Tuesday. And he got me to go, he got me to commit to go to an AA meeting before the end of the week. And then, being the overachiever, all in or all out guy that I am, I had an event downtown with the tech industry that ran to about 8 o'clock. So I went online that afternoon and I looked up AA meetings, and lo and behold, there was a meeting at 8:30 at a Legion, which was literally a quarter of less than 100 meters off the road I was going to drive home on. Like I was going to practically drive by it. And so I left even a little early from my event downtown, and I probably showed up at the meeting just a little bit after 8. And it's in a Legion. Legions were originally founded to serve people who served in the military. So for your listeners, like, they're a bar. So I walked into this meeting and the doors were open and there was a whole set of tables and there were beers on a bunch of them. And I literally was like a deer in the headlights. I'm like, I'm not even 24 hours sober. I'm standing there, and then 3 people went by, and they were going to the meeting, and they have that sixth sense that people in 12-step recovery have. So they said, "Oh, if you want the meeting, go down the hall and up the stairs." And thankfully, I turned right and I went down the hall and I went up the stairs. And I went to my first meeting, and towards the end of the meeting, the chairperson asked, "Is there anyone new who would like to stand up and introduce themselves?" And fortunately, the chairperson waited quite a while, probably 20 or 30 seconds.
Okay.
And I'm sitting on my hands. And then finally, I kind of jumped up and said, "I'm David and I'm an alcoholic." And I think that was probably a breakthrough moment, because it was the first time I'd said that word and, admitted it even to myself. And I made that my home group. It's still my home group 13 years, 9 months, and some odd days later. Although since COVID, we haven't been able to meet in the Legion, so we meet somewhere else now. But then I was there this week. In fact, I'm currently secretary of that group. So,
That's
but
beautiful.
so when I say, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and then I think the universe put Kevin and his skills and his knowledge in my path, so that I had an opportunity to get sober. And I won't say it was easy, right? But fairly early on, I lost most of the craving, and then did things like make sure there was no beer in the house, and my wife was still drinking wine. But early on, I said to her that, like, I was not going to open a bottle, I wasn't going to touch a bottle, I wasn't going to buy a bottle. I have not gone into a liquor store since the day I got sober. Not once. Like, it's one of my boundaries. I do not go into a liquor store. I do not buy liquor.
That all sounds like this beautiful transformation that every alcoholic secretly yearns for. However, the alcohol serves a need. For me, it was to dull the pain. For you, it was a range of things. How did you exchange the alcohol? What did you do to have your needs filled?
I think early on was lots of meetings. Lots of meetings. What was I doing? 2009. And I was between gigs at that time, so I wasn't working. So, I had time to do a little bit of reading in the big book and consider it. And I got Kevin in the background helping me make sure that I'm, like, doing the right things. And, I still exercised at like 6 o'clock in the morning, even when I was supremely hungover. I literally do not know how I did that. I do not know how I did that.
Oh, boy.
And there were also some financial messes that I'd basically been working with Kevin to clean up for kind of 18 months. So, we continued down that path, and it had quite a bit of emotional stuff with it, shall we say. Like, we need to sell our big expensive house on a hill and downsize to a more modest, not a lot more modest, just a little bit more modest, but it radically changed our financial situation. I sold my boat, we sold our recreational property up in the mountains, and we sold our house in a 9-month period.
Wow. Normally talk about huge stresses in your life. The only thing that you didn't do is change your relationship and
Yes.
emigrate to a new country. Otherwise, you did it all there. So
And that would have happened if we weren't so codependent, I think, in some ways.
And we need to talk about that because it takes two to tango.
Yes.
So what was your wife's relationship with alcohol?
Her relationship has always been like, she likes her wine, but not every day. And, she's the kind of person who can, go halfway through a second glass of wine and kind of go, I'm feeling tipsy, and just leave the rest. Drives me crazy. But of course, when
isn't it?
Of course, when I was drinking, it's like, oh, good. More
Exactly. That is, there are recipes for leftover wine, and they always confused me. I didn't know what was leftover
what
wine.
was leftover wine?
That's right. This didn't exist in my house.
Yeah, early in our relationship, we did a trip to France, and we visited with a friend of ours in France, who's a professional friend, but we got to stay in their house, and she was shocked when Pierre put the cork back in the bottle. She said, "You can do that?" So
good, exactly.
And that was probably like in my mid-20s. So by then I'm already demonstrating pretty strong. I don't know if I'm a full-blown alcoholic or not, but I'm certainly demonstrating alcoholic behaviors.
Well, we can do a quick test now. Did you feel that you had to cut down at that time in your drinking?
No, I would say not.
Were you angry when people were talking about your drinking, that you were drinking too much?
I so high performing that no one ever questioned my drinking.
Did you feel guilty? Did you feel guilty about your drinking?
Probably not.
Interesting. Did you need an eye opener? Did you drink some alcohol in the morning?
No, I never really needed an eye opener.
See, interesting. So these are the typical screening questions, the cage questions that we doctors would ask to gauge, is someone suffering from an alcohol use disorder? In other words, being an alcoholic.
I remember like in the late 90s going to my family doctor, and there was a pamphlet, by the receptionist desk with like 20 questions around alcoholism. And, I answered 17 yes out of 20 at that point. And then, it said if you answered 4 more, you should speak to your doctor. And I was like, oh, this fucking thing, they don't know what they're talking about.
No, that's
and also I probably, among my social circle, I'm a sailor. So like talk about drinking,
of course,
among sailors. I probably could identify 20 people, could have answered 17 of those questions. Yes.
And
so again, just totally normalized. Like this, doesn't everybody do this? Like, isn't this how you live your life?
But that's how we are. We surround ourselves with like-minded people. So therefore, you can hand on your heart say, me, I'm an alcoholic? No. Joe over there, no, he is an alcoholic. Look at him. But you yourself, complete denial. And that is 95% of alcoholics will tell you, hey, there's nothing wrong with me. Hey, they will have this degree of denial there. And that's so hard. It takes time, and it often takes the slippery slope, and it takes maybe a DUI, or maybe hitting your wife, or whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
Exactly, to finally, for you to get the message. And
and so if I can bring it around like to entrepreneurs, specifically business owners.
Yeah.
So a couple things is, if you're an alcoholic, there is, a relatively strong probability you're going to hire people who maybe aren't full-blown alcoholics, but definitely like to drink. And, you're the kind of CEO who has the Friday, beer get together. So that's like kind of one aspect. And it's like, if you do get sober, like what now? Like, because you're not going to drink beer on Friday with everybody. So that's figuring that piece out is one kind of issue. And I had a non-alcoholic CEO of mine a little while ago, who's in super high end, like they have an industrial product. So it requires, you're talking to very senior people. And, you just have he said, we went out to dinner with the sales prospect with our top salesperson, and they needed me there as the CEO to create belief. And, everybody had 2 drinks before dinner, and we averaged 1 bottle of wine per person. Right. And then a few people had drinks after dinner. And is this normal? And I said, well, it's really normal for alcoholics. And unfortunately, there is a really, really strong alcoholic culture in this kind of high-end sales, high-end performance. I have another former client of mine who works for one of the largest tech companies in Canada. And again, like you go out to these dinners with 12, 14 people, and and even when and it's kind of a boss is sitting across from you, and he says, no, I don't want any wine. And then the person keeps filling his glass. But he, it's like it's very difficult to say no to that person because, it's your boss's boss. Like, and what's interesting is that he's, as he's fairly new in sobriety, he got a couple years, is as he's had some of his years and shared those and our coaching sessions and kind of ways he can deal with it and ways he can get better. But it's really interesting when he's really stood up for himself. He's had other people come to him afterwards and say, thank you for doing that, because it let me feel okay not having drink, and I did not want to drink. So, that was the flip side. But again, when you're an entrepreneur and that is the culture of the business you've created and how you sell things, where you go to trade shows and you go hang out with a bunch of people drinking, that's the thing to do. I help them navigate that, and things that you can do and strategies that you can have so that you can still be there, but you can protect yourself.
Exactly.
Right.
That's beautiful. That's where, and you're spelling it out. You need a coach in those things. It is the same thing as if you're now in your mid-50s and you say, hey, you know what? I want to start a new sport. I have no clue how to do that sport. So you wouldn't just go out there, buy something and just start doing that sport and then injure yourself on your first training session. Yeah, you would probably ask someone, hey, how do you do those moves in the gym or whatever it is?
Or if you take up skiing late in life, like not as a teenager, which I know people who have. Yeah, like, if you're smart, you go take ski lessons.
Absolutely.
And you get over your ego saying, oh, no, you should know like how to ski on the first time.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Bullshit.
Even my children who started skiing when they were 3, they didn't know how to ski the first time. Let me tell you.
Exactly.
They fell over a hell of a lot more than they stood up on the skis.
And well, a fair call. They are a little bit lower to the ground, so they don't care as much.
It hurts a lot less. It hurts a lot
My
less.
point. When you do that when you're 55, yeah.
My kids are now 33, 31, and 26. And even they are starting to say when they have a wipeout that they're starting to feel it. The early 20s, like, no way. They're just like...
Touche. But I want to come back to something that you've just said about that experience of one of your mentees who went out there to actually open up about his own journey with alcohol. That others come to him and say, wow, I thank you. This is so much more common what you are saying than others would believe, because there's always the shame and guilt, these evil twins that write you and, oh my God, could I say that I'm an alcoholic? No. What will the other people think around me? Well, guess what? They know. My mentor, he was very big in finance and he was an entrepreneur extraordinaire, but he was a drinker to the extreme. But he had his contracts were so ironclad that the people that were in business with him couldn't get out. And then when he got sober, people said, oh God, I'm so glad, because the only reason we are still with you is because we couldn't get out of your contract. We knew you were an absolute bloody alcoholic. And he thought, no, I've hidden that well. Yeah, no, you don't hide it well. That is the reality.
There's exceptions to that.
No. I would debate that, because you and I can now smell a bullshitter a mile away.
But among our social group and a lot of our friends, none of them suspected I was an alcoholic.
Oh, really? You were such a chameleon.
Yeah, such a chameleon, and so good at, again, that like just get it to that certain level. And I was super expert at hiding, like really like.
Oh, please,
you know. And I'm sure you're the same. And, but to more to this point, I see myself at this current present moment as really two really big missions around alcoholism. So one is I've broken my anonymity and come out because I want to reduce the stigma.
Good.
Like I want to say it's okay. And I want to offer hope. There is always hope.
Absolutely.
And those are really my two primary missions and why I come on shows like yours. I mean, to share the broader message, but if people leave and they only go away with two things, it's like admitting, you know, alcohol is absolutely prevalent in our society, and it's one of the most dangerous drugs in the entire world. And we don't treat it that way. And there is no shame in being an alcoholic. It is no moral failure to be an alcoholic. It is a mental health disease. I have it is formally diagnosed. And anyone, I believe, can get and stay sober. There is hope.
100% agree. Wow. David, you are a force of nature there. I love it because you're so focused. You have taken on, for example, you've taken on the flow of this interview really beautifully, and you've weaved a red thread through our discussion. That was superb. I did not need to do very much here. This was, thank you. You did my work. But it shows how you think. It shows how you function. You find the core of the problem and you're dealing with it. You're doing the due diligence that you do as an entrepreneur, as an investor with a business. You've learned to do that with people. You've learned to see what actually makes them tick and why we escape into alcohol, or why we use alcohol for the reasons that we do. And that is so powerful. And I could not agree more with you. The past does not equal the future. It is so important. Whatever has happened to you up until this moment, it doesn't matter. Yes, there are many mental scars, and maybe there might be quite some physical scars there as well, but that trauma does not define you. That trauma is the power that is pushing your bow back. You are now at the point, the sheer fact that you're listening to this podcast, to this video,
Indeed.
You are here already. The tension in your body is already there. You are ready to release that power. And now it's just a question, where do you aim that bow? Where do you aim that arrow? Because you are ready. You're ready to take action. And that is the key thing in recovery. It's not just sitting back, maybe I should. No, it is taking action. It is getting up in the morning, having a shower, brush your teeth. It is doing little bits, little steps, tiny, teensy baby steps, but they're little baby steps in the right direction. And that is how you get momentum in a new life. But it's hard for you to see that. Too many of us are stuck in that hell of, there is no hope. I've deserved that. Whoever would understand what I have done? These are all lies that alcoholism tells you, that your depression tells you, PTSD tells you. That's bullshit. Guys, you can, and I say guys, no, guys, girls, anything in between, I don't care. Go out there.
Another thing that's kind of, common knowledge, right, is that, not that many women are alcoholics. Well, the data is it's about 60-40 men to women in the research that I've looked at, right? And I know lots of recovering women alcoholics. And, back to Coach Kevin, I don't know what got me. Well, I think, again, I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. But also just the fact that he engendered that trust so that I could open up to him. It's also why, like 7 years ago, I decided to, stop being a senior executive and entrepreneur and move into coaching, because I wanted to give to others what Kevin gave to me. That gift of being able to listen, to be able to share, to take those scars and show you how you can build on those, to create an extraordinary life, that you deserve an extraordinary life, and that you're fully capable of it, even if it's really hard to see from where you are right in this moment.
Absolutely. David, if people like the message that you are sharing here and like your attitude and aptitude, where can they find you?
Easiest is my website, coachdjgreer.com. So my full name is David James Greer. So it's Coach D as in David, J as in James, Greer.com. Mm-hmm. And my phone number and my email address are right there on the homepage. So feel free to reach out. I'm also active on social media. You can reach out to me that way. Yeah.
Guys, check out the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast, because all his links are down there. Once you're down there, press the like and subscribe button, because David has certainly opened my eyes. And despite the fact that not just because we are both so long in recovery, sometimes to go back to the basics, go back to what really has happened to us, compare, reflect, you look at the same old story in a new light. So therefore, I will go away from this interview thinking, okay, and maybe some new revelation. Well, there has already a few revelations during this interview here, will be there. So I grow, and I'm so grateful for having the opportunity for creating the privilege to talk to people like David. I take active steps to change my future and in turn change the future of those around me, like you guys out there listening to us. So why don't you go out there and try to do the same? Tiny little steps. Take action. If you have never been to a meeting, throw the prejudices away and try to figure out, is there a meeting somewhere physically close to you? If not, who cares? It's the world of Zoom. You can find
exactly. Go to an online one.
Absolutely. There is no excuse. And take it as an experiment as well. And just one thing I would like to add. You had, obviously, from the very first moment, you had a very positive experience in the AA. You gelled with your group. And it's interesting, there was not a single time that you mentioned the word God. Often enough, people are not very religious, and somehow they believe that AA is a very church-driven kind of thing. The reality is that often we meet in churches because that's where you can get a cheap room to meet. So that's really the reason. Many groups are secular, and the word God, for many of us who do not believe, God can be a group of orderly drunks, a group of druggies, okay? So you don't have to be a Christian to approach AA or a similar 12-step program. The 12-step program is a business model, really, how to help a failing business. And I've written that here, My Steps to Sobriety. Check it out there. I've described it exactly as that. So therefore...
and like I'll share, like I was a little put off by that word.
Yeah.
And, you know, in AA, we read part of this book in a chapter called How It Works. And towards the end of that, it says the chapter to the agnostic. And so, you know, I eventually read that. And then also there's an appendix that talks about a spiritual awakening and how it happens gradually. And, you know, today, the letters God for me mean a power that's something that's bigger than me, which I manifest or imagine, you know, is the universe or the life force of the universe. Like, it's bigger. I don't really understand it, and I don't have to. In fact, if I understand it, it's probably not the right thing. And my experience was very much that you talked about taking little steps, and I just kept taking little steps. And then one day I realized that, you know, I was living a much more spiritual life.
Beautiful.
And that's what I focus on today.
Beautiful. So yeah, it does not matter in which deity you believe, or if there's no deity at all,
or any. Yes,
yeah, exactly. So don't get spooked about it, and just look at what is behind it, between you and me, and don't tell anyone. But in reality, the founder of AA was actually not religious. But it was all done in the 1930s, and he thought, well, really, how can we sell that? And at that time, God was selling, and that sounds like sacrilege to many people in the AA. But in reality, there are letters from his wife who actually confirmed that. So there you go. So don't get hung up on the Christian side.
And in that chapter about to the agnostic, I think there's 39 different ways that a power greater than yourself is referred to.
Beautiful. I need to read the chapter again.
Because I in one pass of doing the steps, the facilitator and I decided we'd count when we read that chapter.
Oh, excellent.
So we did.
Excellent. Perfect. So there you go, guys. No excuse not to take the first step, okay? And if still AA or 12-step programs is not that, then there are other more scientifically based schemes out there, heaps and heaps and heaps. Guys, go back in my show. I've had guests from virtually every nook and cranny of the recovery world there. Help is out there. It is not just possible, but likely, highly likely, that you will change your life given the right direction and the right support. You can't do it alone.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and what I know for me is there's no way I could do it alone.
Absolutely.
And I'm not certain anyone can recover from alcoholism alone.
Exactly.
It's the nature of the disease.
Exactly. David, what a fantastic interview. I truly, truly enjoyed that. You're an amazing man.
Thank you so much.
No, absolutely. So, guys, if you haven't gotten something out of this interview, then really you need your head screwed off, back, rattled, and screwed back on. Because this was gold. Okay, guys. So, David, thank you very much. Look after yourself, and you guys out there, live with passion. Bye.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.